Why Tyla flopped in 2025 and why Black America won't accept her colored identity. 2025 has been a tough year for some of music's biggest names, and not just in the US. Tyla, fresh off a Grammy and international success, dropped her highly anticipated EP, and it flopped. Yet, she wasn't alone. Other high-profile artists have missed the mark too. But for Tyla, the conversation quickly shifted from music to identity, when she proudly called herself colored. Many Black Americans took offense. What's going on here? And why is her racial identity sparking more outrage than her sales numbers? The 2025 flop list. Tyla's sophomore project opened to surprisingly low numbers in the US. Less than 4,000 first week pure sales, despite heavy marketing. But she wasn't alone. Glorilla, Kaytranada, Polo G, and Lato all had less than 4,000 first week pure sales. Firstly, there was a disconnect between streaming and traditional sales. Many of these artists still performed well in terms of streams, but failed to convert the buzz into actual album purchases. There's also changing consumer behavior, with singles and playlists dominating listening habits over album sales. Lastly, there's market oversaturation and discoverability issues. Even known artists can struggle to break through when release schedules are overcrowded. Other artists who flopped in 2025, despite carrying major buzz and strong digital followings, several high-profile Black American artists struggled with sales in 2025. Normani's long-awaited debut album Dopamine entered at just 91 on Billboard's Hot 200. Despite praise and star-studded collaborations, then quickly vanished from the charts. Social media lamented she dropped the album, and then after that she dipped, underscoring issues with promotion and timing. Meanwhile, Coco Jones, though amidst much hype, opened her debut LP, Why Not More, at number 55 on the Billboard Hot 200, with approximately 15,000 first week sales, reflecting a modest commercial traction. Even as she headlined a 40-city tour, her achievement as the #1 R&B debut that week was noteworthy, but still revealed just how uphill the road was amid a saturated market for Black female R&B artists. So overall, several R&B and pop artists saw major underperformances this year, due partly to a slowing economy, oversaturation, and changing streaming algorithms. But with Tyla, the conversation wasn't just about the charts. Social media, especially Black American spaces, zeroed in on her identity. This cannot be overemphasized. In South Africa and in Southern Africa, colored is an official racial classification that exists alongside Black African, white, and Indian and Asian. Colored people have mixed ancestry, African, European, Asian, and their culture is deeply rooted in Southern African history. It's a respected identity in her homeland, and it's a proud identity with its own language, influence, cuisine, music, and tradition. When Tyla said she was colored, she wasn't rejecting African heritage. She was stating who she is in South Africa and in the Southern African context. So what does colored mean? In South Africa, the colored identity is not just a racial classification. It's a deeply rooted cultural and historical identity shaped by centuries of mixed ancestry, including African, European, and Asian heritage. Under apartheid, colored was a legally enforced category, separating people from both black and white populations, with its own distinct communities, traditions, and social dynamics. While this classification was born out of an oppressive system, many colored South Africans today have reclaimed it with pride, celebrating their unique heritage, language patterns, cuisine, and music. For someone like Tyla, openly identifying as colored in South Africa and in America affirms this rich tapestry of identity and its connection to a specific cultural community. If she were to adopt the American Black label, which in America often includes anyone of African ancestry, it could be interpreted back home as erasing or rejecting her colored heritage. In South Africa, this could be viewed not just as a shift in racial terminology, but as a denial of the very cultural pride that many colored people have worked to preserve. America's different racial boxes. In the United States, racial identity is shaped by a completely different history. The racist one-drop rule meant that anyone with African ancestry was considered black. The term colored here is an outdated slur from the segregation era. So when Tyla says she's colored, Americans hear something very different to them. It sounds like she's distancing herself from blackness. This is where the conflict begins. It's important for Black Americans to be tolerant of different cultures and racial identities across the globe, because blackness is not a one-size-fits-all concept. It shifts depending on history, geography, and local social structures. While the US has its own painful legacy of the one-drop rule and rigid racial boxes, other parts of the world, like South Africa, have different racial systems that shape how people see themselves. Tyla, for example, grew up proudly identifying as colored, a distinct racial and cultural identity in Southern Africa, and celebrated that heritage without controversy in her home country. At just 22 years old, she's now navigating intense scrutiny in America in regards to racial politics, where her lifelong pride in her heritage is being reframed as a rejection or betrayal. Respecting these differences is not about diluting anyone's cultural pride, but about recognizing that global unity among people of African descent depends on understanding, not erasing, the nuances of each other's identities. The vlogger backlash. Within hours of her interview going viral, vloggers were calling her out. Tyla's rejecting her Black American identity. She doesn't want to be associated with us Black Americans. She's cosplaying Black when it benefits her. Some even accused her of being a tether, a term used by FBA and ADOS circles to describe non-American Black immigrants who they claim exploit Black American culture without sharing the same history or struggles. This ties into a bigger conversation. Some foundational Black Americans and American descendants of slavery argue that Blackness in the United States should be reserved for descendants of enslaved Africans in America. Tariq Nasheed himself has tweeted things like, "We're not the same. Africans are not Black in the American lineage sense." Others in the ADOS circles say immigrants can't just claim our culture and history. By their definition, despite Tyla's African ancestry, she should not be considered Black in their political and cultural framework. That's the irony. The same groups accusing her of rejecting Blackness often reject Africans as Black themselves. Tyla is not the only South African colored in Hollywood. Other South African colored stars in Hollywood have faced similar issues. Leslie Ann Brandt from Lucifer, proudly colored, often is pushed into simply calling herself Black in the United States. Jay Manuel from America's Next Top Model, who was born in Canada to a colored South African mother, has spoken about the erasure of his nuanced heritage in the United States.
No, I mean, I feel like everyone should know this, but apartheid was basically a system of laws in South Africa, a system of laws that were designed to oppress people of color and all people of color. Apartheid made it illegal for Black and white people to interact with one another, my parents included. You know, at the time when they were a couple, it was against the law. Me being born was against the law.
It's a crime for him to be here.
Yeah, my dad couldn't be on my birth certificate. My parents couldn't have me on the, like, you had to have a registry of all the people that lived in your house at the time. My grandmother couldn't have that in her house. But I think most importantly, the thing a lot of people don't realize is apartheid essentially was perfect racism. You know, like, I'm still learning about how perfect the system was in terms of, like, they went around the world. The government actually set up a commission to go around the world and study racism. And America was one of the places they came. They went to Australia, they went to the Netherlands, they came to America, and they were like, what is the racism here? How does the state oppress people of color? What can we use from the system to take home?
Trevor Noah, who is classified as colored under apartheid rules, is almost exclusively labeled Black in America, which oversimplifies his story and his heritage. Jonathan Butler, a musician, also has colored heritage, but found that US audiences didn't recognize that term. All have experienced the flattening of their identities into an American racial binary. To be fair and completely honest, Tyla should not have to conform. American racial categories are deeply rooted in its history, but they aren't universal. And that history needs to be taken for what it was: oppressive. Tyla shouldn't have to erase her South African identity to fit into the American binary Black and white. Her identity is complex. It is legitimate and it should be respected because of where she comes from. Forcing her to conform is another form of cultural imperialism that Black Americans themselves reject. one that flattens the diversity of African identities to fit into American expectations. So, what's the big lesson? Tyla's story shows how easily diasporic unity can fracture when we fail to understand each other's histories. Yes, words have different meanings in different countries. Yes, identities are shaped by local histories. Instead of demanding that she adopts an identity that isn't hers, maybe we should all ask, what can we learn from each other's cultural realities? Because global Blackness, in all its forms, is bigger than America. So, what do you think? Should Tyla adjust to American racial norms? Or should Americans respect her South African identity? Drop your thoughts below. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for more conversations on music, culture, history, and identity.
Tyla, the streets are saying that EP sold 2 fillet of fish and a basket of fries. Step into my office immediately. First, you need to decide who is going to be your core fan base. If it is white people or a more global sound, then I need you to go to Europe. The whites there, they love that. They love it down. But here in America, it's not happening. It's not happening. So if you want a more global, more type of fan base, go to Europe. Go to the Beans and Toast. They will embrace you. On the other hand, if you want more Black American support to push your music and propel it forward, which I would argue is how your music started going forward with Water in the beginning, then you're gonna have to wrestle with how you feel about being called Black in America. Even if you are not Black in your country, you will be Black here. And you are not ambiguous enough to get away with saying you're not Black when you look like the exact Black people that are telling you that you're Black. Sorry. So you need to decide, and your fan base also needs to decide, or whatever you choose, you need to tell them to get in line behind you.